Hi y'all, welcome back to the garden. Today I'm doing an exciting review of another robot lawnmower that was sent out to me by Mammotion. If you've been watching the channel, you know last year they sent out a 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 robot mower, and I've been using that mower over the past year to cut pretty much half of the back property. Well, this spring they released a new 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲X, which I also have and I'll be doing a review of in a couple weeks, and a new one called the Yuka. The motors on the new Yuka for 2025 compared to the 2024 model have twice as much power on them for cutting. And it also has 5 blades, so it'll help cut grass more consistently. If you watched last year's video, you know Mammotion's robots also have obstacle avoidance. So if you're walking around the yard, it's going to avoid you, your pets, toys that you left out in the yard. That obstacle avoidance features can be turned on and off, which is helpful in some instances, which I'll talk about in this video. Now the Yuka is a little different than the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, and I like it for a specific reason. I'm using it to cut exclusively the area behind the pool. Now one of the major differences between the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 and the Yuka is the Yuka has a lawn sweeper attachment that you can put behind it to sweep up the clippings as it mows, which is nice around the pool area and things like that, where you just don't want the clippings maybe coming in on your feet or your pet's feet and getting tracked into the house. I did utilize that feature for several weeks, and then I found that it was working so incredibly well that it was a little more maintenance than I wanted to do to keep the lawn clippings up and moved out of its way. So this is the lawn sweeper attachment. You can see it's got a roller here that rolls the clippings up as it mows in front of the sweeper. And there's also a weight to counterbalance the Yuka when the lawn sweeper is on top of it, because it's quite heavy on the back, which means it needs a counterweight on the front. And this sits right over the vision module that's responsible for obstacle avoidance. Now, when you utilize the sweeper, you do set a dump zone. And in my case, I had it traveling through this little gate here, back to the back of the property, dumping the clippings back there and coming back in. That was working pretty well and I liked it. But as I mentioned, because it was cutting so much and picking up so much at once, I was not being timely enough to go move the clippings elsewhere. If you're using the lawn sweeper attachment, that is something that you have to maintain, is make sure that those clippings are moved out of the way of its dump site so it can continuously dump more clippings right there. I didn't want that maintenance, but I found generally in garden care and lawn care that mulch mowing is also super effective at making your lawn healthier. If you're cutting your grass regularly and you have small clippings, those are just going to fall on the ground and add nutrition back to the soil. Another con to the lawn sweeper attachment, which is one reason I removed it, is it makes the Yuka much longer. So it has more difficult time turning around in tight areas like the pathway that I'll show you to the front yard here. But otherwise it performed incredibly well. So if you have a lawn that doesn't have a whole lot of tight areas to navigate in, it will work really great for you. Let's take a look at it behind me here. So I have not weed-eated my lawn, as I wanted to show you how this robot mower is maintaining an edge without me having to weed eat. That is something that you still will need to do depending on how your garden is set up. This is something where in the last video that I reviewed the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 in is just to set your expectations on what these robots can do. The Yuka is 2-wheel drive and it has 2 powered wheels on the back of it. You can kind of hear how loud it is here in this video. Very quiet. You wouldn't hear it going. It wouldn't disturb you if you were sitting around with friends on your back patio. But it does make a whining noise like all of these little robot mowers do, because they're utilizing razor blades essentially to cut your lawn. This version is the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 3000, which means it'll cover 3,000 square meters. They do have down to a 1,000 square meter robot. So this will cover roughly 3/4 of an acre and cut it several times a week. So the goal with these robots is not to let your grass grow up 4 to 5 inches and then cut them. It's for it to cut multiple times a week, depending on how much it's raining and how dry the season is. One of the big pros of the Yuka as well is it has removable batteries. So if you purchase the lawn sweeper attachment, that obviously requires a little more effort from the battery so you can get an extra battery for that. If the batteries wear out, you can replace the battery. And in my case, I have 2 batteries in it, so it will cut this entire area in a cross pattern, which means it goes over it one way and then it turns around and goes 90 degrees against the whole lawn the other way. And I found that that works best with this robot. This robot also does not necessarily have shocks like the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 does. Instead, it uses a floating mower deck mechanism to always keep the height perfectly when it's traveling over humps and bumps in your lawn. Let's take a look. So the garden beds back here are getting pretty weedy, but you'll notice on the top of the mower that you set the height from 1.2 inches all the way to 3.9 inches on this mower. You cannot set the height in the app. I kind of like this feature on here because it's set it and forget it. You just set it to the height you want, it mows that height. If you need to adjust the height ever, you have to do it manually though. So that is a downside. The 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲s can be adjusted remotely in the app. And you may notice as it's hitting the side of the fence here that the impact mechanism on this robot is its entire outer shell. So if it hits the side of the fence, the whole shell kind of comes in and it notices an obstacle and it will reverse or move out of the way. I also want to talk about its climbing ability, because when I got this robot, I was not expecting it to be able to go all the way up to this little area of the lawn and turn around and cut it. And the reason is because it's not all-wheel drive, but it does a really good job. It has the 2 back wheels that work really well, and the front wheel is kind of like a caster wheel. So you'll notice here a little bit, it kind of falls down, but it does a perfect job of cutting this entire area really well. And it's been cutting this now for a couple months, and I've not had it get stuck up here when the lawn sweeper attachment is not on it. I would not be able to cut this area with the lawn sweeper attachment on, and that's one of the reasons I also did not use it or decided to just do mulch mow with it, because I really just wanted this grass cut regularly with the rest of it. So if you have extensive hills in your lawn, I would recommend something like the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, but the Yuka seems completely capable of handling a pretty steep hill, an incline here. So I think their website indicates it'll handle like a 24% incline, which equals out roughly to like a 45-degree angle, which is a pretty steep incline. And I've seen that it's done that really well. You may have more issues with that when you put the lawn sweeper on it as well, because it just makes the robot heavier. You have to have the counterweight, and with the lawn sweeper on it, it may reduce that ability to climb up taller hills just by a little bit. Now, Mammotion was doing something really nice this year and including a free year 4G coverage for these robots. So here in the United States, they operate, and most of the countries, there's some countries that have this new feature called iNavi where they can work completely wirelessly. Here in the United States, they need a system called an RTK system, which is a little device that you mount on your home or in a post in the yard near an outlet with open view of the sky that receives GPS and helps triangulate the robot down to a couple centimeters in your lawn so it doesn't get lost. And with its vision system, it does a really good job and built-in GPS in the robot of just cutting really well around the things in your lawn after you map it. You can see right here, this is the second lap it's making around the perimeter of the pool here and the lawn. So you map this robot just kind of like a little robot car. You drive it around with your phone by Bluetooth, show it where the edges of everything are. It will follow that and then map out a way to cut that, any angle you want. For anyone wondering what the RTK system looks like, it's this right here. Just a small little thing. You just need open view of the sky and a power outlet, and it helps triangulate the robot to cut your lawn. Now, because these robots have RTK GPS navigation, they can operate at night. You can see there, it got a little stuck. It bumped into the concrete because it's not completely even. That's something I'm going to be working on the lawn here in the next few months. And it stopped for a moment, noticed there was nothing wrong, and started the blades back up again as a safety feature. So it's continuing to navigate around the perimeter. But because these robots use RTK to navigate, even though they have a vision system, you can cut the lawn at night when everyone is asleep, and it will work perfectly fine. Now, the obstacle detection will not work quite as well because it is vision based. So to the extent you have anything in your lawn, you would want to clean that up. But if you just needed to cut the lawn without any obstacles or the vision system, it can do that for you too. So I've been trying out this robot for a couple months now, and I'll put an indicator on the screen of how many hours I've been cutting with this. I'm a pretty tough critic, and I loved my 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 so much that I was like, am I really gonna like this robot? And I think it's grown on me. Initially, some of the software did not have parity to the features of the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 for any of the releases this year, and that's just something that they've been working on the past few weeks. For instance, when I received it, you weren't allowed to cut the perimeter first. The robot decided how it was going to mow for you, and it cut the perimeter last. For me, I found cutting the perimeter first works best, because if the robot's going to get stuck anywhere, it's likely going to get stuck on the perimeter. They've implemented all those features, so now there is feature parity between last year's version and this year's version, so that's no longer a concern of mine. I've had less issues since that software feature was implemented. Let's talk a little bit about the obstacle detection and obstacle avoidance features. They work really well. In fact, I think they work a little too well in some instances, like needing the ability to go through gates. So I have a small gate here that I was using the Yuka to exit out of and go cut or go drop clippings at the end of the yard over there, and I had to turn obstacle detection off for it to make it through that gate. It is a narrow gate, but it's not overly narrow that I think it should be able to have issues. So I think the obstacle detection, at least for channels, which are channels or allow you to navigate from one mowing area to another mowing area that does not overlap, or from the dock to a mowing area if you need to put the dock somewhere on concrete, like I originally had it up on the patio over there. The channel obstacle avoidance needs to be adjusted a little bit and can be worked on. But otherwise, the obstacle avoidance has worked really well for me in both the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 and the Yuka. Now, because this is not an all-wheel drive robot like the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 is, I would recommend the Yuka on a flatter lawn that has less bumps and humps, but as you notice, it was climbing this perfectly well over here, and there are actually stepping stones in the lawn there from years ago that are almost buried under soil. So those wheels were even climbing over some raised couple of inches of stepping stones here and there, and it's really bumpy, and it's still doing a perfectly good job cutting it because it has that floating deck mechanism. Now, the fact that Mammotion is including 4G for these robots for the first year of ownership is really nice, because you can control the robot by Bluetooth to get the task started. But if your Wi-Fi doesn't work really great outside of your home, then you may have issues like checking on the status if the robot's further out in the yard. It'll still cut without wireless signal from 4G or Wi-Fi because it utilizes the RTK to transmit those GPS signals, not necessarily 4G or Wi-Fi when you're utilizing the RTK. But if you have Wi-Fi or 4G access that comes free for the first year, you can pause the status remotely and then continue, start a task, all those type of things that you could do as if you were connected by Bluetooth almost. Just like the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, you can set multiple zones. So if I wanted to zone this so it cuts one part of it first and the second half last, I could do that. This is small enough here that I've only been cutting it as one zone. In the future, that may be something I decide to split up a little bit. And let's talk a little bit about cut quality. I've been completely satisfied with the cut quality of the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 and the Yuka. All of these, or most of these mower systems, use spinning razor blades. It's a safety mechanism. If it hits a piece of wood or something, the razor blades get flipped around because they're just held on a little screw. So if there are sticks in your yard, if it hits a stick, the razor blade's just going to spin around and it's going to keep going. You may hear a little bit of winding or crunch from the razor blade hitting the stick, but it'll just chug right on through it. All right, let's talk about the mow quality on these robots. I've been completely satisfied with the mow quality on all of these. I do use a crisscross path in this area, so it cuts it twice. This is a couple days growth here. As I mentioned, I'm cutting 2 to 3 times a week, depending on if it's raining or not, to keep this grass under control. If you let it get too high, the cut quality may suffer and you may have to cut it twice to get it back down consistently. That's just how these robots work. But you can see the path here, which is where it's cut today, so far the perimeter, and a couple days growth there. So get about as low as I can. You can see that quality is pretty darn good for a robot mower. A couple things you don't really want to do with these mowers are the same type of things you wouldn't want to do with your regular mower, and that is cut during the rain or when there's a lot of dew. That just allows those clippings to get stuck under the deck and requires them to be cleaned more often. These robots do have a rain sensor on the top of them, so if it's mowing and it detects rain in the app, you can tell it you don't want it to mow on rainy days, and if it starts raining during a task, it will go back to the base. As far as the charging system, I have my charging system set right here right now. I've been working on getting some electrical out in another area of the yard to put the charging system. There are holes in here where you can stake it down with included stakes. I do like the dock on the Yuka better than the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, or the charging mechanism, because these prongs are what charge it, and they actually flex back and forth on these little rotating spindles, and so it makes it really easy to pair up when it goes back to charge. The 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, sometimes if it doesn't make a direct contact really great, it has to pull back forward and adjust itself and back up. The Yuka has never failed to dock the first time perfectly. So I wish that docking mechanism was something that would be brought to the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, because I think it's just a much more effective way to get these on the charger. So overall, hardware-wise, I'm really happy with the Yuka. I think Mammotion builds really heavy, sturdy products. The mower weighs about 40 pounds, and it weighs probably even more with the mower sweeper attachment on it and the weight. They are really heavily built. When I first unboxed the mower last year and I first unboxed the Yuka this year, I'm just like, these are some really great, well-made products. Software is what powers them, and software can be updated and changed, and that is something that I think Mammotion needs to work on improving their software integration with other services. For example, I mentioned the rain sensor. It would be awesome. I own a Tempest weather station. It would be awesome if the Mammotion could integrate with third-party weather stations that are local to customers, or that the customers own themselves. And so the weather station could detect a storm's coming because it can detect lightning coming from a distance, and the Yuka could stop cutting earlier. Or if the contact sensor is wet, but the weather station detects that it's not raining right now, maybe I want the Yuka to cut, because maybe it's just wet because the charging station is in the shade and it's not completely dried off yet, but the grass is dry, or there's dew, or some other weather mechanism. It would also be great if it could integrate into other just home automation systems. I'm a big proponent of home automation and love tech, and so I love seeing systems work together in a natural way that just makes it easier for the user of those products. So let me end this video by kind of discussing who I think the Yuka is for. I think they would be really excellent in people who own subdivisions with small lawns under 3/4 of an acre. That's the biggest one. The smallest one cuts 1/3 of an acre or 1/4 of an acre. So if you live in a small lot with 1/3 of an acre house, you could probably get away with the smallest one because the house is going to take up some of that acreage. And if you think the robot's a little big, they also make a Yuka Mini, which is like a little shrunk down version that they just came out with this year that looks really awesome too, and would probably cut this lawn really well. Something else with these robots is you really just kind of got to tinker with the settings to see what works with your lawn. As I mentioned, I like cutting the perimeter first. I found that works best for me, and if the robot's going to fail with all my curvy garden beds and anything, it's going to fail in the perimeter. It's not going to fail in the middle of the lawn. And by fail, I mostly mean get stuck, because I have it going into the garden bed slightly. If it's muddy and rained a little bit, those wheels can get stuck. I'm giving this robot a little more difficult time than they're intended to be, but that's what I'm trying to do to trial these. And something I want to conclude about these, if you're thinking about robot mowers, because I've had several viewers reach out to me on Instagram and email about the robot mowers because they've seen them in other videos or they've seen my review from last year. If you get one and you're having issues with it, you probably just need to play with the settings. You can set how much the robot overlaps. So if you're not getting like that perfect cut, maybe it needs to overlap a little more. Or maybe it's getting stuck on the perimeter on something, like in the mud. I have it get stuck sometimes in this garden bed behind me because I got it going over a little too far and I need to technically remap it and clean up my garden beds I haven't got to yet. Maybe you just need to edit the map and redraw the boundary line for the robot so it doesn't do that. Maybe you need it to cut the inside before it cuts the perimeter first. I enjoy cutting the perimeter first. I found that works best for me, but it may not work best based on your gardening conditions. You may need to rotate the angle a little bit. So it will take a couple weeks probably if you get one of these robots to really dial in the settings, testing, adjusting the spacing, half an inch or an inch. It's really depends on the lawn type, and I'm glad that they give that much flexibility to customizing how much overlap you want in your garden. If you increase the overlap, obviously it's going to increase the mow time a little bit. But some people are also disappointed with how slow these mowers are to cut. But they're not intended to be fast. They're intended to take care of a job while you can do something else and forget about it. And some of the benefits of using a robot mower is simply a healthier lawn. I have provided no inputs to the lawn since I moved here. No nitrogen, no fertilizers, and it looks really great back here because it's being cut by a robot for the past year. Previously it was cut by the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, and now the Yuka is dedicated to this task. And it just like any other plant in your garden, if you're pruning it regularly, it will thicken up and spread up and reduce weed growth. There are no ruts in the lawn. It gets cut multiple times a week instead of just once a week, and then a bunch of mulched and dead grass on top of the lawn. So the benefits of them are also really great just for lawn health. All right, as we conclude this video, you can see it's doing its back and forth right now. I'm going to walk in front of it and test the obstacle detection. And then I want to show you a cute little feature that I think is quite neat. So you can see it's going back and forth this way right now. I'm just going to stand here and we're going to see and watch it go around me when it gets over here. Now, the vision system on the Yuka has a little wiper on it to clean it off, which I think is really nice because the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, the vision system, you have to clean off pretty regularly when it's dusty. But let's watch it go around me here. You can see it was supposed to go straight where my feet are. It's just navigating right around me here perfectly. Now, if I can get in front of it right quick, you can watch that vision sensor go off. You see it light. It's pretty cool. There is an emergency stop on these, so if you need to stop the robot for any reason, you can press it. It says task pause. I really love that there's a pickup handle on this one. All right, y'all, thank y'all for joining me on this video. If you're interested in any of the robot mowers, I will put a link in the pinned comment to Mammotion's website. They have a big variety now. They got the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 2X, which is an improved version of the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 that I tested out last year. And I'm cutting with the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 2X now, the front half of the property. So I've got 3 robot mowers going. And then they have mini 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲s and mini Yukas. And so there's a tiny version of this one and a tiny version of the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 if you have a small property. And they look equally as amazing. Thank y'all for joining. And remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.